A dad murders his 4-year-old son. Then he claims he did it while he was sleepwalking. His other two kids did survive the attack and they testified against him. Was this a horrifying parasomnia event, or was it a desperate excuse to cover up something darker? Today, we are breaking down the case of Joseph Anthony Mitchell. Hold on to your butts, guys. This one is tough. And trigger warning for child murder, which I already alluded to, but just want to make sure you understand. This one is tough. I have re-recorded this episode multiple times because I have sobbed so profoundly and so profusely that I could not continue. So I'm going to try to do this today. Best wishes to all of us. And if you have to skip this one, I completely understand. It's tough. I'm not going to play the 911 call. If you have occasion to listen to it, you're going to need tissues. Okay. All right. Let's talk about who the Mitchells are. So Joseph Anthony Mitchell and Christine Parolini met in the early 90s in New York. So Christine was a nursing assistant. Joseph was an EMT, and so they kind of met in that way. And also they both work in the medical field, and they definitely seem to have a lot in common. Christine ends up getting pregnant while they're dating with their first child, Alexis. And in 1998, when Alexis was about a year and a half old, her parents did get married. Not long after they got married, Christine gave birth to their second child, a boy named Devin. I have heard it pronounced Devin and Devon. I am not sure completely which it is. So while the kids are young, Joseph and Christine decided to leave New York in hopes of finding a home that was a little bit safer, a little bit quieter, better place to raise their kids. They end up in North Carolina, and they decide this is it. We love this. So they land in Durham, North Carolina, a city well known particularly to college sports fans, as it's the home of the Duke Blue Devils. Oh, and thank you to Mark for writing this case up. And he put a yuck after that. So I guess at KQ, we don't like those. If Mark doesn't like them, I don't like them. I don't know him, but I don't like them. After the family moved, Joseph reportedly had several jobs, and Christine later said that the financial situation was always kind of questionable, which was super nerve-wracking because they had two young children. And Joseph seemed to be in and out of work a lot. And there's always a reason for it and all of that, but I can understand her frustration there. So Christine's father ends up helping them purchase a house in Durham, but in 2006, the bank started the process of foreclosure on this home. They were able to catch up on the mortgage payment, so they were able to keep the house. The home was not foreclosed on. The house that Christine's father, Pete Parolini, helped the family purchase came with an apartment off the garage, and he actually lived there. He had cashed out some of his retirement and savings to help them pay for the home and hoped that it would get them on the right financial track. Look, if I can help you with this, maybe you can get everything else in order, right? I think one thing that would have helped the most is if Joseph would get a damn job. But here we are. Undoubtedly contributing to Christine's anxiety about the family's finances was her third pregnancy. As excited as she was for their second baby boy to arrive, obviously, their financial situation is not where it needs to be. It's already really precarious. They're already pretty nervous about it. At least she is. So I can imagine that the thought of a third child coming into the picture is can we really do right by this child? Is this the right thing? All of those things. But baby Blake was born, and obviously they fell in love with him. And, it's you have all these fears, and then the baby comes in, you're like, we'll figure it out, So we are going to get some information about Blake from his obituary, which is horrific. His obituary describes him to a T. Blake Anthony Mitchell came into the world bursting with joy on February 15th, 2006, in the company of his whole family and getting his first kiss from his big sister. His life of 4 years was filled with laughter, color, boundless energy, and immeasurable happiness his family celebrated every day. Foo Baby, as he was always known, was brimming with affection, quick to tell his family how much he loved them. He was, quote, all boy, with an insatiable curiosity and special love of balloons, bubbles, and Mickey Mouse. Blake will also be remembered for his humor and how he imitated his big brother. Gosh, okay. All right. I made it through that. We made it, guys. We made it. We're 6 minutes in. Okay. There was no question that Blake was the final piece to complete the Mitchell family. Unfortunately, though, Christine and Joseph's relationship got more strained during her pregnancy with Blake. She said that Joseph became extremely distant. It wasn't abnormal for him to go weeks at a time without speaking to her. There is very little that I like about this man. And it's going to get worse. I understand that there are people who do not have the emotional intelligence to process their feelings and therefore avoid and withdraw. I do understand that. And sometimes you need to take a little bit. Hey, I need to take a little bit. And then we can hash this out or whatever it is. Not speaking to your wife for weeks on end, while, by the way, you don't have a job. What else are you doing? That's not acceptable and it's abusive. He just wouldn't speak to her. And men can come at me all they want and say that not speaking to your spouse and ignoring them as if they don't exist is not abuse. And come at me, bro. You won't change my mind. All right. So that's that. During her later testimony, Christine did say that Joseph helped with Blake's delivery, but then after that, their relationship was like really up and down. Their finances weren't getting any better. When the finance industry hit a wall in 2008, we all remember that unless you were a wee little baby. 2008 was rough. And Joseph lost his position with Wachovia Bank, and it was the start of a 2-year stint of unemployment for him. Okay, so I guess he didn't not have a job the whole entire time, but he was in and out of work, and he was working at the bank for a while, and then 2008, and then he didn't work at all for 2 years. Which, look, 2008 was rough. I had a hard time. I mean, I was much younger than I am now. I was in my early 20s, I guess then. And I couldn't even get a job as like a server because I was being told that I was overqualified to be a server. And I'm like, okay, but I could be a good server. Like, I've done it before. Okay, fine. Then give me the hostess job. Like, give me something. I mean, it was a very, very difficult time. I am not trying to diminish that. I remember as a young person living at home that it was very difficult financially. I didn't have people depending on me or anything like that. I am not saying that. This did not start for Joseph in 2008. It was kind of always there, just came in waves. As 2010 started to come to an end, Christine said that she was preparing to start selling her jewelry and even the family's minivan to make sure that they had money for essentials. Before she sold anything, though, Joseph said, wait. I've got a job interview with the Red Cross. And I think that this is what we've been waiting for. It's going to turn everything around, right? I'm going to finally be able to help provide. Now, I do also want to say, I know that for men especially, that provider role is very important. It's a high pressure, societally, patriarchy hurts everybody, okay? This to me, if you start looking at the pieces that fall into place that make a situation ripe for a family annihilator, those pieces are there. This case is wild. It's wild. On Tuesday, September 21st, 2010, Christine and Joe were in bed just before 9 p.m. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until 13-year-old Alexis burst into her parents' bedroom screaming, "Daddy's trying to hurt us." And Christine looks over and Joseph, who she called Joe, wasn't in bed at that time. Alexis later testified that some things were fuzzy from that night, but she believes that she remembered someone pushing her head into her mattress and maybe she had blacked out or something. She said she woke up later, she could hear her brother crying, and she said, I remember seeing my father on my other little brother, and I tried to get him off of him, the little brother. I ran to my mom's room to tell her what was happening. I went back to their room and I picked up Blake and I brought him to her bed. Durham County Sheriff Sergeant Len Roberts recounted that Alexis told him that at one point that night, she woke up and her father's hand was around her neck. That is terrifying. That's not the worst of it. She elbowed him and bit him, and she elbows him, she bites him, and then he just takes his hand off her neck and walks away. Which is strange, right? Alexis said several times that she thought it was a dream. She thought she was dreaming, having a nightmare or something, until she started hearing her brother cry. 10-year-old Devin, the Mitchell's middle child, told Sergeant Roberts a similar story. He said that his father came into the room twice trying to smother him, but he was able to fight him off as well. When Joseph came back for a third time, he reportedly was flipping the bedroom lights on and off, like he was standing there and just turning them on and off like repeatedly, which is, again, very strange. He also saw that his father was wearing a yellow jacket, but it was his mom's jacket, but he was wearing it. And he's like, what is going on? When Christine realized that something was wrong, she runs out into the hallway and she found her husband in the office. And he had blocked the door and she couldn't get in. So he was like blocking it and she's like trying to get in. And then he locks the door. So now she can't get in at all. And then she said she heard him fall against the door and then slide down it. And she said, I thought he was having an anxiety attack. And so I was yelling at him. Now is not the time for this. Things are finally looking up for us. Like, whatever. When Christine saw her daughter carrying her youngest brother, 4-year-old Blake, from his room to Christine's room and putting him in the bed, she knew something was wrong. She recalled, quote, I was scared to touch him at first because he didn't look right. I touched his arm and he did not feel right. Both Alexis and Devin had just assumed that their little brother was sleeping, and unfortunately that was not the case. Pete Parolini, Christine's father, remember, had come back home around midnight that night. He was really confused when he heard loud noises coming from upstairs. He said he described it as a ruckus, and he's like, there was running back and forth. It's midnight. Everybody should be asleep. It sounds like there's a lot going on upstairs. It was definitely unusual. I had never heard this happening like this, especially at midnight. It sounded like something was wrong. So he runs up the stairs and he can hear Christine yelling at Joe through the locked office door. When he saw Alexis carrying Blake, he also immediately recognized that something was wrong. And Pete described Blake as looking limp, like a doll. So he calls 911. He knows something is super wrong. He runs to a nearby neighbor's house who is a nurse. And again, Pete's 911 call is chaotic. And they did not know what was happening. So he didn't know what to say to the 911 dispatcher. So he's like, my grandson, he's 4 years old. We can't wake him up. My son-in-law is locked in a room. My daughter is up there screaming. Her husband won't come out. I don't know what's going on. Like, we need help here. Like, he says, we think the boy is dead. We don't know why. My son-in-law, we don't know where he is. We think he's in a room upstairs. Like, he cannot understand what is happening. And he doesn't understand why. He comes in the middle of it too, which Christine is just as confused, and understandably so. But I don't know if to him, he's like, is there like a medical emergency? And now Joe's freaking out, or like, is everybody having a medical, like, what's going on? Like, clearly nobody was like, oh, Joe's trying to kill everybody. So dispatchers are attempting to figure out who should respond, since the Mitchell's home was in Durham County, but had an Orange County address. Oh my God, jurisdiction, geez, oh, Pete. Christine's horrified screams filled the background of the call, but her demeanor immediately changed when Pete handed her the phone, and the dispatcher started giving her instructions on how to perform CPR on Blake, which she already knows how to do. She's a nurse assistant. But when it is your child, it is completely different. That is one thing that, like, when you look at cases and people are like, well, she was a nurse, she knew what to do. Like, why wouldn't she have done that? I have witnessed, I used to work for a doctor, and his wife was also a doctor. And he's a plastic surgeon. She was an internal medicine doctor, worked in the ER. She's seen trauma. She's seen all kinds of stuff, right? Their youngest daughter, she was like 2 at the time, had fallen at daycare and had sliced, I think, like her lip open, or I'm forgetting exactly where it was. I was there, but she had a pretty bad cut. She needed stitches. So his wife had picked her up from daycare and brought him to the office, and he was going to do the stitches. I mean, if you are a plastic surgeon, you would want a plastic to do the stitches on your child's face. Like, no offense to ER doctors, but plastic surgeons do it differently. So anyway, so they're like, all right, he's going to do the stitches. This is a woman who works in the ER and has seen a lot of stuff. And she was falling apart. She almost passed out. She thought she was going to throw up. Like, there was no blood in her face. Like, this was very difficult for her. And like afterwards, she was like, when it's your own kid, like, it's just so different. So I understand Christine being like, what the fuck do I do? What the fuck do I do? Like, her whole life has imploded in front of her, by the way, too. So like, anyway, that is something that you will see. And I feel like in that situation, like, there are cases where doctors have done something to their family members or whatever. And so that's one of the things that the police will be like, well, they knew how to perform CPR. Why would they have done it here and not there or whatever? If they genuinely hadn't done anything, it could just be like fight or flight, like, oh my gosh, and this is somebody I love and I don't look at them as a patient. Like, this is all that stuff. Not that doctors don't care about their patients, but it is different. You have to have the other evidence to back it up, right? Like, Christine is in fucking shock right now. Absolutely. So she's on the phone with the dispatcher. She's following the instructions. Sometime during the 911 call, the neighbor that Pete had summoned arrived at the Mitchell home. Her name is Cynthia Ross. She's a nurse at Duke University Hospital. So she takes over compressions on Blake. And she later said, like, I didn't understand what had happened. I didn't know what was going on. I just assumed there was some kind of an accident. She was like, I figured, like, he fell out of bed or he had, like, fallen out and choked or something. She's like, I definitely didn't think anybody had done something to him or that something bad had happened. I just thought, she was like, I just kept thinking, I know how to do this. I can do this. He's going to start breathing again. I can do this. Shortly after Pete called 911, first responders arrived on the scene and they immediately began tending to Blake, who'd been brought downstairs. Then there was a loud crash upstairs and deputies broke through the office door that Joseph had barricaded himself against. And inside the office, Deputy Chris Vermillion found Joseph unresponsive, leaning against the doors with his legs out in front of him. And remember, Christine heard him hit the door and then slide down it. I'm telling you, this case is fucking wild. He was in a pool of his own blood. He had 3 stab wounds to the chest and a cut on the left side of his neck, and there was still a knife in his hand. While responders were working on Blake and they were getting ready to transport him, Christine checked on her other 2 children. She said that as she looked over Devin, she found marks on his neck. Christine gets to Duke University Hospital, and she was devastated to find that staff could not revive 4-year-old Blake. Her son was pronounced dead, and Christine couldn't begin to wrap her mind around the likelihood that her husband had murdered him. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Joseph Mitchell wakes up on September 22nd. He's in a hospital bed at the same hospital where his son had been taken and did not make it. He claimed to have no memory of what had happened in his house that night, but he was quickly charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and then 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Investigators searched through the Mitchell home, trying to piece together what had taken place. A Durham County evidence technician found a Halloween mask on Alexis's bed and a bloody jacket and bloodstained gloves in the office where Joseph was found. The defense later explained that Joseph had been wearing all 3 items when he attacked his 3 children. He put on a Halloween mask. Can you imagine how fucking terrifying that would be to wake up and there is somebody standing over you in a mask who you're not going to assume is your father, And at some point, they do realize it's their father. Investigator Tom Malone followed responders to Duke Hospital and noted bruises on Blake's neck that he testified matched the pattern of a gold bracelet that Joseph was wearing that night. And it was determined that the knife wounds found on Joseph were self-inflicted after he suffocated his youngest son. Those who knew Joseph were like, I cannot believe this. He would never hurt his children. There was no history of abuse. His father-in-law, Pete, described Joseph as a man who was truly devoted to his family. And also to the point that like people were like, he's so non-confrontational that it's like, could be a problem for him, you know, like almost to his own detriment. He won't like, not that they were like, well, you know, maybe he was just fed up or whatever. Like they were just like, he's just not angry. Christine even says at one point, like, I don't think he ever raised his voice to me. Now he just withdraws and just doesn't say anything. But he wasn't confrontational. Like it was just unfathomable almost. Christine said that she was completely unaware of how serious the situation was that night. She said she thought he was maybe having some sort of like a mental breakdown, but she had no reason to think that he would ever hurt her children. And remember, before they went to bed, everything seemed normal. So she wakes up in the middle of the chaos and just still thinks that he is having his own situation. And she gets the kids into her bedroom to make sure that they're together and they're safe. She doesn't know that he has attacked them yet. They did have, you know, some financial trouble. They did have a sometimes strained relationship. But she said at this point, we were working it out and we always said we have each other. Like there was no like, this is the last straw and you broke it, you know, kind of thing. Like it seemed like things were getting better. Remember, he had that interview and they thought it was going to go well and like all this stuff. So he's going to go to trial for this. And while he's waiting to go to trial, he was housed at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. And his defense was entirely built around the idea that because of the significant stress Joseph had been under, he'd been sleep deprived for weeks. And they said that what had happened on the night of the murders was a parasomnia event, which became referred to as the, quote, sleepwalking defense. The defense was set to argue that Joseph had no idea what he was doing that night, and he shouldn't be held responsible for attacking his two children and murdering Blake because he was asleep. He wasn't conscious when it happened. The prosecution was like, fucking miss me with that, okay? You got me fucked up if you think I'm going to believe that you weren't even conscious, that you didn't even know what was going on. You knew what you were doing that night. You did it on purpose. Your actions were triggered by the financial problems that you guys were facing. Specifically, one particular event. It was discovered that the Mitchell's home had gone into foreclosure in the summer of 2010. And remember, they'd already done this once. They got back on track. And as far as Christine knew, the house wasn't in trouble. That wasn't true. So Joseph said he hid this fact from Christine and her father because he thought he could renegotiate with the bank. He thought he could solve the problem before they actually took the home. When Christine found out about this, she assumed that he was just trying to protect her. And Joseph said, you know, she had enough to worry about. I didn't want them to worry. I just wanted them to live their lives. I would figure it out. It was mine to figure out. He said there was plenty of time for him to have figured it out. During the trial, two representatives from BB&T Bank and a real estate agent testified that the bank had indeed foreclosed on the Mitchell's house in June of 2010. And they said that Joseph agreed to give them the keys to the home in exchange for $500 by September 22nd, 2010, in order to avoid being evicted. Does that date sound familiar? Because it's a day after this sleepwalking event. The real estate agent told Joseph that he'd also need Christine's signature, though, to solidify the exchange. And Joseph reportedly told the agent that his wife was out of town for some time that month. Christine was like, no, I wasn't. I wasn't traveling. I was completely unaware of this situation. In fact, I was under the impression that the bank was working with us because that's what Joseph told her. By the time that Joseph's trial took place in March of 2015, Christine had legally divorced him. Both Alexis and Devin testified in the trial, recounting everything that they remembered from the night that their father had attacked them. One of Joseph's defense attorneys, Jay Ferguson, started his opening statement by describing what happened that night, saying, "The circumstances are bizarre," as his wife put it, mind-boggling. He started to kind of build the foundation for the sleepwalking defense. He said, Joe Mitchell had not been sleeping well. He'd go to bed, he'd sleep for an hour, he'd wake up, he'd be up the rest of the night. While Joe was there and he acted violently, he wasn't in control of his actions. This is known as a parasomnia event. If you are anything like me, you are thinking at this point, what a crock of shit. You didn't know what you were doing. Seriously? Now look, and I know that sleepwalking can cause like a lot of things. One of my cousins growing up was a really bad sleepwalker, and he would get up and he would move around and he would go do stuff. They ended up having to put like an alarm system on the house because he would like leave the house. Like he'd just walk out the front door in the middle of the night. They'd found him asleep in the front yard before. One time he was asleep like partially in the road when they found him. So at that point they were like, okay, we've got to do something about this. That way they would at least know if he tried to walk out the door. And he totally is asleep. He has no idea this is happening, right? I know that those things can happen. This, I was like, and with all the circumstantial evidence around it, you don't have a job. Your family's about to lose their house. You're putting all that pressure on yourself rather than bringing your wife into it so that you can all work together. You know, you can be a team. Now you've decided this is all on you. And now what's happening? It's wild. As witnesses and attorneys recounted the events of that night, Ferguson pointed specifically to the fact that Joseph just walked away after Alexis bit him and pushed him away, as well as how he walked in and out of the boys' rooms at least twice before fatally injuring Blake. Ferguson said that all of this shows that he was not someone who had intent to kill. Remember, he kept turning the lights on and off. Like, those are kind of strange things. One of the witnesses that was brought in by the prosecution was Central Regional Hospital psychologist Nancy Laney. Laney interviewed Joseph 4 times over the year leading up to the trial and described him, quote, as a narcissist who'd had a sense of entitlement about life and lacked empathy. And she further explained by saying, he never mentioned to me how difficult... He never mentioned to me how difficult Blake's death must have impacted his children or wife, and that was telling. Laney disputed the claim that Joseph was sleepwalking. She found no evidence of him doing so and said that Christine told her that Joseph wasn't having issues sleeping. He was definitely stressed about being unemployed. He was definitely stressed about the financial issues, but there wasn't this like major trouble sleeping. Laney testified there's no evidence to suggest that Mr. Mitchell was suffering from any kind of mental disease or defect or condition that rendered him unconscious at the time of the alleged offenses. In a conscious state, he had the cognitive abilities to plan, attend, initiate, and carry out his actions. During cross-examination, defense attorney Ferguson asked Laney why she put more credence in Christine's version of events than Joseph's. She said that Joseph gave inconsistent answers and information during their interviews. Ferguson told the court that during her interview with the sheriff's office, Christine said that both she and her husband had been losing sleep over the past few weeks because of the financial issues. So he's pointing out, well, that's an inconsistency. Forensic psychologist Dr. George Corvin testified that Joseph was likely suffering from a sleep disorder called non-REM parasomnia. Have you ever heard of such? This would mean that he could perform different types of tasks without knowing it, and could become violent if triggered by a loud noise. So what he's saying is sleepwalking happens, obviously. Adults and children can sleepwalk. Children, if they're woken... have you ever heard when people are like, if they're sleepwalking, don't wake them up, don't wake them up, don't wake them up? I have always heard that. This doctor said it's less common in children for them to become violent if they're woken up in the middle of like a sleepwalking, I don't know, episode, event, or whatever. But he said it is more common in adults. And he said, quote, I think he was in an altered state of consciousness that rendered him unaware of his extensive specific behaviors for a fairly extended period of time. Anything could have been a triggering event, at which point this sort of bizarre but not dangerous behaviors would then convert into bizarre and dangerous behaviors. Dr. Corbin echoed what Joseph's attorneys claimed: the disorder could have been brought on by stress and lack of sleep. He ended his testimony by saying that Joseph was, quote, incapable of exercising any criminal intent when he attacked his children. Y'all hang in there, because it's crazy. It's crazy. Dr. Grace Thrall, another psychiatrist, testified that she conducted a psychiatric evaluation on Joseph shortly after he regained consciousness at the hospital, so right after this happened. And she said that Joseph told her that he did want to kill himself. However, the next day, he denied any thoughts of harming himself. He didn't recall talking to her the day before. He seemed to not remember any of that. Dr. Thrall said that Joseph presented as a man in a significant state of depression. She noted a lack of energy and testified that Joseph told her that he, quote, rarely showered, wore the same clothes day after day, and had gained 30 pounds because lack of exercise and didn't clean up around the house or yard. After her evaluation, Dr. Thrall placed Joseph on suicide watch, and she explained to the court that she noticed little emotion from Joseph, saying, quote, I don't think we'd seen a person who had attempted to take their life and was accused of killing a child have such a lack of emotional response to that. Joseph did take the stand in his own defense, and he claimed that what had happened that night was out of his control. He said, I know I would never harm my children, so it's hard for me to comprehend that Blakey's not here. He said that his sleep patterns were very irregular and that if he slept 2 hours during the night, he considered that a lot. I mean, this is like worse than newborn sleep. Like when you've got a newborn, apparently. Like, that's considering 2 hours of sleep being well rested, that's pretty crazy. Joseph denied having any plans to hurt any of his family or hurting himself. He admitted that he was nervous when Christine first found out that she was pregnant with Blake because of the financial problems, but when he was born, everything changed. He was so excited to have another child. When he explained the situation about their house being in foreclosure, he admitted that he had withheld that information from Christine, but claimed that it was done with the intent of not worrying her. He said, quote, I did everything I could to build a happy home. The jury, which was made up of 9 women and 3 men, deliberated for less than 4 hours after listening to several days of testimony. It wasn't that long of a trial. Those in the courtroom, and you can actually watch it. Like, it's not, you can find it in parts in like their local news outlets website. I think if you just type in like Joseph Anthony Mitchell trial, you can see it. You can watch his testimony. So they deliberated, it's not that long of a trial, but they only deliberate for like 4 hours, less than 4 hours. Everybody in the courtroom, including Christine, were absolutely stunned, shocked, bewildered, befuddled when they came back with a verdict of not guilty on the first-degree murder and the attempted first-degree murders of Alexis and Devin. Reportedly, Christine was so upset about the ruling that she actually had to be taken out of the courthouse on a stretcher by first responders. She collapsed. I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine. She later told the Daily Mail, quote, I failed. I couldn't save him, referring to her youngest son. And she didn't do anything wrong. But, it's just so sad. It's so sad. After the verdict, one of the jurors who did not want to be identified told WRAL News that, quote, she regrets the verdict, but she says the jurors were left with no choice. So she said that she was, quote, embarrassed to be a part of this, and they were really just trying to follow the law and do what they could. So, you guys, here is where we are going to get into how the law works. She explained that because there was no question as to whether Joseph killed Blake, it left them in a strange position because the jury didn't find any intent or malice in Joseph's actions, but it was clear that he had committed the crime. So what they were saying was, yes, he did it. I don't think that the state did not prove that he had planned it. Okay? The state did not prove that he'd planned it. But we know he did it. After deliberating for about an hour and a half, the jurors actually came back to the judge with a question. And they said, hey, could we consider a manslaughter charge? And the judge said, no, he is not charged with manslaughter. The prosecution in this case did not include the lesser offense of manslaughter as a possibility. It was first-degree murder or it was nothing. So, I'm sorry, they could have charged him with second-degree murder as well, but they also didn't think that that fit, that the evidence that they had in the case did not fit with a verdict of guilty on second-degree murder either. So because they could not charge, or they couldn't convict him of manslaughter, they had to acquit him. And the jurors said, quote, we would have definitely convicted him of manslaughter. We felt like our hands were tied. We came very close to a hung jury. A lot of people were very upset because we didn't want to do what we felt we had to do, which was say he was innocent, which, again, in our justice system, we've got guilty or not proven guilty. I think a lot of people have a hard time with the innocent thing because it's like, especially in this case, I know that he did do this, so he's not innocent. He did it. But they did not prove him guilty of the charge that they charged him with. And that is, if the prosecution did not prove the elements they had to prove, then this jury did the right thing. And it sucks that they wanted those high charges or nothing because they could have come out with a manslaughter conviction, but they didn't. It was all or nothing. Casey Anthony was the same way. Like, they went forward when they either should have waited or they didn't have enough, or, you know, when you overcharge it, like, I think they went on emotion. I think they thought the jury was going to vote on emotion, but they voted by the law, which is how it's supposed to happen. And this is a devastating, devastating verdict for the family and for their community as a whole. I mean, it was terrible. And this juror said it was mortifying to be a part of it, but we all swore to do our duty. The Durham County DA countered, saying that if the jury believed that Joseph committed the crimes consciously, quote, there's some level of malice and or premeditation that comes with that. If you don't believe he committed these acts consciously, then certainly it's not what some people think of as a heat of passion killing, so therefore voluntary manslaughter does not apply. I mean, okay. But if he didn't premeditate it, then first-degree murder doesn't apply, but you charged him with that anyway. Like, the same juror said the jury didn't necessarily believe Joseph, but that the defense presented a better case. And she said, quote, I don't know if he was sleepwalking or not. I think he's a pathological liar. Everything he said was mostly discounted by us. So him getting up on the stand didn't help him. It did not help him. But the evidence presented by the defense did. So let's get into that. Joseph Mitchell's defense team was not the first to use sleepwalking as a defense. In January of 2010, 18-year-old Joseph Bravio Mendez was accused of stabbing his mother, Lydia, I don't know how to say her last name, Etanislo, 20 times while she was asleep in Lewisburg, North Carolina. Mendez also stabbed his 14-year-old sister, Juliana Matthews. His mother survived 20 times, but his sister did not. Gosh. Mendez's mother said that after several tests performed over several months, it was obvious that her son had no memory of the attacks. Mendez's defense attorney told the WRAL News this was a very unique case in that the state's own psychiatrist came to the conclusion that this was a sleepwalking case. Mendez, who was just a senior in high school, had been on the phone with his girlfriend before the attacks, reportedly, quote, becoming enraged. The Franklin County Sheriff, Pat Green, said that, quote, his 14-year-old sister was asleep on the sofa, and he just jumped on her and started stabbing her. She started screaming, and then the mother came in and tried to get him off of her, and then he turned on her and started stabbing her. So after the stabbing, Mendez walked over to a neighbor's house and asked them to call 911 because he had done something wrong. And then when the deputies got there, they found him lying on the neighbor's floor crying, "All I know is I hurt my mom and I don't know why." Lydia said her son had, quote, suffered some level of mental handicap, her words, but he'd never shown any signs of violence. Everyone who knew Mendez described him as someone who did not cause trouble. He was happy, he was energetic, and nobody expected him to murder his little sister and attempt to murder his mother. In October of 2011, he pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and assault and was given credit for time served. Though the DA was hoping for a different outcome, they said that it was difficult since the state's two main witnesses testified that Mendez didn't know what he was doing at the time that he did it. He was given 3 years of probation and required to have regular mental health evaluations. In January of 1997, Scott Faylater said that he went to bed with his wife, Yarmila. Then the next thing he remembered was standing at the top of his stairs in his house while a police officer pointed a gun at him and yelled him to get on the floor. A neighbor of the Faylaters called 911 around 10 p.m. after looking over the wall that separated their property and seeing Scott dragging a woman over to the backyard pool, pushing her body into the water and holding her head under. Police arrived and found that his wife Yarmila had been stabbed over 40 times with a hunting knife before she was drowned in the pool. Scott reportedly didn't remember any of it. The same neighbor said that when he saw Yarmila laying on the ground near the pool, Scott was walking through the house, turning lights on and off and wringing his hands. He then saw Scott put gloves on before he pushed his wife into the pool and held her head under. The prosecution also explained that the police found Scott's bloody clothes in a food container, oh my gosh, and the bloody knife in a spare tire storage area in the back of his car. And to them, these actions showed intent and planning, and he's trying to hide it and cover up and all this stuff. Scott's mother and sister both testified that they'd seen him sleepwalking several times. He would get fully dressed for school in the middle of the night. He'd try to go outside, but then he would get really aggressive if his sister tried to stop him. He never recalled any of these events either. Though Scott was initially not on board with his attorney using the sleepwalking defense, he ultimately agreed and he went through several studies. 2 leading sleep experts testified that they believed Scott killed his wife while he was asleep. Even 2 of his cellmates testified that they'd seen him sleepwalking in his cell. He was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder largely because of the prosecution's argument that it was unlikely for someone to carry out so many actions and such specific actions during an episode of sleepwalking. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently imprisoned at the Yuma Prison Complex in Arizona. In Joseph Mitchell's case, when you listen to the psychiatrist talk about the things that he did and the fact that these all lead you to believe that it was a parasomnia event, the fact that he was turning the lights off and on over and over. He had gone, I think, into the attic to get that Halloween mask. He was wearing Christine's jacket. He also stabbed himself 3 times in the chest. And they said that, and then he sliced his neck. And they said that when the first responders got to him, he seemed to be unaware that he'd been stabbed at all. They were like, "How much pain are you in?" And he's like, "None. What do you like?" He didn't seem aware of anything. From what the doctors say, he seemed to be not awake. He didn't seem to be conscious. He didn't seem to know what was going on. He didn't seem to know that he had stabbed himself 3 times. And they said that the way that he stabbed himself, it would be very difficult to keep doing that the way that he did if you were awake and you were feeling that pain. But they said that that is something that can happen when you are unconscious and you are in a sleep state. You don't know it's happening. And so he's just boom, boom, stabbing himself. And he collapsed after he stabbed himself that many times and he was laying in his own pool of blood. But they said And he was doing those repetitive actions. He was walking, he'd walk in, he'd walk out, he'd walk in, he'd walk out. They also said that explains why when the older kids fought back a little bit, that he just like walked away. And then he'd walk back in a room and he'd walk away and then he'd come in and turn the lights on and off. Like he was doing things that didn't make any sense. I don't know. I don't know what to think. The other thing that came out in the trial, by the way, is that, so one of the doctors said, do you remember telling me, like in one of their interviews, do you remember telling me, or do you remember telling one of the doctors, maybe the attorney was asking this, do you remember telling one of the doctors you talked to after you woke up in the hospital that you had run away from home at like a super young age, like 10, and like had made his own way and had like hitchhiked all the way to fucking Hawaii, I think they said somehow, and like he grew up in Hawaii and all this stuff. He's like, me at 10? No, I don't remember that. And it sounds ridiculous, right? Because you're like, and they're like, and you were in foster care and all this. He's like, no, I don't remember saying any of that. But apparently he told his wife the same thing. Like when he met his wife, she thought that all of those things were true. She also thought he had a college degree, which he did not. He told her that he graduated from whatever college it was that he graduated from and he had whatever degree he had. That wasn't true. And so they asked him about that on the stand. Why would you say those things? Why would you tell her? Like, why would you tell her these things? He's like, well, I didn't want her to know how I really grew up because it was terrible. They're like, okay, well, why'd you tell her you had a college degree you didn't have? Why'd you tell her you went to a college you didn't go to? I wanted her to be impressed with me. For 13 years, I think they were together like 13 years, maybe more. She thought all these things. She thought this is how her husband grew up. She thought he, had left home at a certain age. She thought he grew up in Hawaii. I don't know if he'd ever even been to Hawaii. So yeah, that's why the jury was like, we think he's a pathological liar. We don't believe anything he says. But when you hear the evidence from these psychiatrists and these people about these sleepwalking disorders and how some of the things that he did were so bizarre that they can only be explained by the fact that he was unconscious and the fact that he didn't even know that he'd been stabbed. I don't know. Joseph Anthony Mitchell was far from being the first murder defendant to use the sleepwalking defense, and he wasn't even the first to be acquitted of all charges. After his trial, Joseph told the media that his goal was to reunite with his family and two remaining children. It does not seem like this has happened. And look, I don't blame them at all. Even if he had no idea, even if he was completely unconscious, you cannot get out of your mind that that man put a Halloween mask on and tried to murder me. And he succeeded with our youngest brother. No. Based on social media, it does appear that Alexis has now gotten married and has had a little boy of her own who definitely shares some resemblance to Blake. Christine still posts lots of pictures of her youngest son to keep his memory alive. His obituary reads, quote, so much of the Mitchell family's world revolved around little Blake, and he has left beautiful imprints upon countless people. All those who knew and loved Blakey join our hearts and voices to claim that light conquers darkness and love is stronger than death. Ugh. Okay. I think I'm far enough away from it now that like I've sobbed enough, but like, oh my gosh, he was 4 years old. My God, I cannot. Okay, guys. So what do you think? Was this a tragic case of sleepwalking? Or do you think it was a carefully crafted cover story? And do you see what I mean by like all of those pieces were in place for like for exactly all of the elements to come together for like a family annihilator situation. And it is wild that it just so happened to be the night before he was going to have to turn the keys over and his wife didn't even know that. And neither did his father-in-law. But then there's also like evidence that's like, okay, maybe he wasn't awake. It's crazy. So let me know what you think. I mean, either way, a little boy lost his life. This whole family has been completely shattered. I mean, it's just terrible. So let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you think the jury got it right or did they totally miss the mark? And if you're into true crime cases with twists, with wild defenses, with breakdowns that make you go, what is happening? And maybe some hot takes and things, subscribe or give this video a thumbs up or share this case on social media or with a friend or whatever, somebody who needs to hear it. Remember, stay curious, stay safe, and ask yourself, WWHD, what would Harriet do? If you liked this episode, be sure to like this episode and follow the show so that you never miss out on new episodes. Get in on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at Killer Queens Pod, or you can join our Facebook discussion group at Killer Queens Podcast, where we discuss cases covered on the show and all things 90s. If you want to submit a case to be covered on the show, visit killerqueenspodcast.com/case submission and just complete the form. And if we cover the case, we'll give you a shout out on the show. Lilas.